Afternoon, everyone. It's Professor Seymour. Happy summer. Now that we passed the Memorial Day festivities, it's time to really get into summer. I want to talk a little bit about the twist in the road we've taken now, and we're going to switch gears a little bit. Just for a moment, we're going to get back to short stories momentarily, but we're going to take a little sidetrack into our drama book, so I hope everybody has purchased their copy of the Seagull Reader plays so we can delve into our first play, which is Trifles. It's important for the next assignment that you not only read the play, and you read it very carefully, but that you also consider the section about the author and the author's intentions, which are discussed in the introduction to the play. It's very important. A couple of things. This is a true story, and the play is written by a woman. Very interesting and bizarre, considering that in the first part of the 20th century, there were virtually no recognized women playwrights. In fact, today, there are relatively few recognized female playwrights, which is a great shortcoming and slowly being remedied as I speak. But at the time, it was very much a man's world. And this play stood out. And part of your reading, I hope, will uncover the reasons why this play stood out. And you'll get a lot of clues to that in the reading of the introduction to the play. One fact being that it is a true story. And it's a story about not only the power of a woman's voice in a man's world, but also the detection by the playwright of various divisions between the way a man thinks and the way a woman thinks. The divisions that at that point were pretty much not recognized. And this play went a long way to bringing attention to those differences. And what today is considered more of a feminist view of the world owes a great debt to this play. It's a little gem, short play, but there's a whole lot there to be encountered and discussed. Now, I've also asked you to read the introduction to the play, not the two-page discussion of Susan Glaspell, the author, but also the pages about the elements of drama, which you'll find in the introduction to the book itself. You really need to look at those sections, and I've given you the page numbers. Please look at those, and as the assignment will show you, I want you to consider for this submission 3 of those elements: conflict, the difference between dynamic character and static character, and some of the symbols that you're going to find in this play. And that's what I want you to think about as you read the play, and then as you go back and think about it before you start to write. Again, it may take you more than one reading. So don't hesitate to go back. It's a short play. And review those elements. Review the second reading with those elements in mind. All of those elements, conflict, character, and symbol, are important to understanding what this playwright is trying to talk about. And then review the questions as I've laid them out in this assignment 9 and respond to them as best you can. Keeping in mind that you do want to provide evidence from the text in support of your answers to that prompt. Conflict is an element which is not in every play that you're going to read, but it is in most plays. And it's important to narrow down where you find that conflict is most defined in this play. And there are various different kinds of conflicts here. In other words, there's a conflict between the classes here as well. Consider the various different levels of society here. Look at the characters: the sheriff, the attorney, Mrs. Hale, obviously an important character. Mrs. Hale shares a certain class with our victim, or in this case, maybe not the victim, but the perpetrator, which is our woman who is here suspected of killing her husband. What does Mrs. Hale have in common with this woman? There's a conflict inherent in that. There's also a conflict in the expectations of what our attorney, who comes from the city, Mrs. Hale, shares with our perpetrator, the life as a farmer. Very different classes there. There's conflict to be found there. But there's also conflict in the way our attorney looks for evidence in the crime, as opposed to what Mrs. Hale finds. Keep in mind, Mrs. Hale has an understanding of the world that our attorney does not have. And I think in there you will find the crux of the conflict. In terms of dynamic versus static characters, consider the definitions of dynamic and static, and then ask yourselves which of these characters represents each. Which is your static character, and which is your dynamic character, and why. And then begin to look at those little pieces of evidence that our attorney is unable to find. Basically because he's not looking for them. And you have to ask, why? Why isn't he looking for them? Has he already made up his mind? This comes from a real case. This is a matter of justice. A crime has been committed here. But then we have to ask ourselves, why was the crime committed? And why is it that the attorney doesn't seem interested in finding it? So there are all kinds of questions to ask. And I wanted to make sure we touched base on this before you jumped into this our first play. I want to thank everyone for staying on top of the assignments. I'm enjoying reading your submissions. I think all of you are making great progress, and I look forward to your further submissions. So I'm going to make this a short lecture, and I'll see you next time in Video Land.